Hi everyone. In our first class about consuming REST APIs with Qlik Cloud, it's about understanding the fundamentals of REST APIs. So you won't be a specialist in REST APIs, but in this class is you're going to learn everything that you need in order to apply this and consume the REST APIs with Qlik Cloud and also other technologies. So this is all the basic things and the basic elements that you need to understand. Okay. So first, what is an API, right? Why it exists? So API is application program interface. So it's a way for two programs to talk. So when you have two systems, you can interact it in different ways, especially for old developers. They have different interface to communicate one application with another. SDKs, con, you have the class libraries, right? So you have different ways. Then REST APIs and APIs is one of them. So it's just an interface where it can facilitate the communication between one system and another. Okay. So it's pretty much like there's an analogy here. It's very common, so you see everywhere. So I just put here too. So it's like you as a customer, you ask something in a restaurant, and then the API you'll be the waiter. So it's just get your ask, and then you go to the kitchen and submit your request, and then deliver something. Okay. That's pretty much what an API does. So you have those layers, right? You have the client, you have the API, and then you have the server, okay? So that's a good analogy. So you never touch the kitchen, so you don't know what's going on there. So you just receive whatever you have ordered. Sometimes you don't, but not for APIs. You always get what you ask, okay? So, okay, what is about REST? So why REST? So it was created by Roy Fielding at the year 2000. So it's not that old, right? 26 years. It's not that bad. It was part of his work in his doctoral dissertation. So REST is representational state transfer. So a small set of simple rules followed by nearly everyone. So yes, so API is very popular, right? So it's adopted everywhere, mostly. One of the most important things about REST APIs is the stateless property. So each request, so every time you ask something, you have to provide everything that the server needs. So your request, it's encapsulated in one single request. So there is no memory in the server about any other calls that you have made. So you have to treat every request as unique. This is especially important when you do pagination. So every time you do a pagination, you're actually making an extra request. So the server does not understand that you're making multiple requests. Okay. It's open, right? So the standard is not proprietary, so it's open for everyone. So and you can use it as much as you want. There are many conventions. So the way you create your API, it can follow standards, different standards. There are multiple ones. Stripe follows a standard. Qlik follows standards. And this is one of the most challenging things. Every time you face REST API, you're probably facing something new because not everybody implements APIs in the same way. So if you learn how to do this for Stripe, and now you're in the next project you're consuming for ServiceNow, it may be different. And that's the challenging parts of the REST APIs. And you have to be experienced. At some point, you're going to face so many different APIs that you kind of know how to face each one of the challenges that you have. Let's say, this one have a very particular pagination method, but I can use what I learned in the Qlik Cloud API or Stripe API, So the idea of this class is to give you the basics that you can use to overcome any challenge in REST APIs. Some are very tricky. I have a lot of experience with REST APIs, but some of them are quite challenging, especially the ones that have a very particular way to do pagination. Okay, but overall, like the basic ones and well-documented ones, with the material that you're going to learn here, you can pretty much cover any challenge. Okay. Okay. So, and one of the very important concepts of HTTP REST APIs are the HTTP methods. Okay. So, REST API, that's a very good topic, by the way. A REST API, you can do multiple things, right? You can create a product, you can delete a product, you can return a list of products, you can edit a product, or you can create a new employee, or you can delete, make small changes, update the whole thing. So for each one of those methods, you have a representation. So it's pretty much like the CRUD in the database. Create, read, update, and delete. Okay. So then for REST APIs, we have the get is just to read the data, right? Most part of time. Post is when you have to create something new, like post a new customer, or create a new customer. Put, update, replace a full record. So let's say you have multiple chains in that record. You can use a put method. Patch is to update a small property of the of that object. Let's say I just need to change the last name of a customer. You may use patch, and delete is when you want to delete the whole thing. It's important to keep in mind that REST APIs is about how the developer implements the REST API. So some you never use patch, so they just use put to change, to update records. Some you use post to get records, especially when you have to do a search. So some search objects are so complex that you need to provide a body in your request, HTTP body, and then it's through post to get data. So it's kind of funny. Get is very common, but posts can be also used to get data. That's important. Patch we never use pretty much. In Qlik, by the way, Qlik Cloud connectors, and that's true for Qlik View, Qlik Sense, and Qlik Cloud. They just implement get and post. They do not use put, patch, and delete. They don't have that at all. So you cannot use those, and you cannot overwrite those methods. There are some techniques where you can overwrite the HTTP method, but in Qlik Cloud, this is not possible. So you cannot do that at all. So in this class, we can only use get and post. In Qlik Cloud, sorry, you can use get and post. Okay. Good. And let's move next. Okay, endpoints. So you probably heard a lot about endpoints, right? So endpoints is just a URL, right? But of a REST API. And they have a structure. And as soon as you learn the structure in a well designed REST API, you can learn everything, right? I mean, it's easy to replicate stuff. So the way you structure your endpoints are very important. And it will give you a lot of answers already. Okay. So in this part here, by the way, this is not a rule, but most of the APIs follow similar standard. So the blue part of this URL is just the base URL. So it's just what is this? What is this, right? Version. So you can have v1, v2, the version of the API, and then the resource, right? So in this case here, we have apiswap.com. That's the base URL. v1 is the version. Charts is the resource. That's the endpoint, okay? And the thing is, what this endpoint will provide to you depends on the HTTP method. So if you point that charge endpoint, but you use a get method, you're going to return something. If you use post, you're doing to create a new charge, for example. If you use delete, you're asking this endpoint to delete. Of course, you need some other parameters to support that. So if you're deleting something, you're deleting what, right? Usually you have to provide a parameter like a charge ID, okay? But keep this in mind. So usually for REST APIs, you have this base URL, the version, this is very common, and the element. You can have subgroups, like Qlik now is redesigning the whole API, and they add namespaces. So now, for example, for automation, instead of just having automations as a resource, you have workspace, I think it's workflow / automation. So workflows like just a namespace. So we can add multiple things, just like a big group, big category. All right. And then yes, so in the bottom we can see like one also a common pattern, right? You can have charts, and if you just do a get charts, you have a list of charts. But if you have charts and the ID, you're looking for a specific one. But again, that depends on how the developers have implemented the REST APIs, okay? And then like a URL, by the way, endpoints are very similar to the URLs, right? You have the query parameters and the headers. So this is something that you're going to use a lot, and you have to understand how to use them. So query parameters are you see in the URL. So after your resource, you have a question mark, and then in this case, you have the query parameters are the limit and the status. So in this case, this REST API supports limits, how many records you want to see per request. And the status is like a where statement. Okay, it's only with the status equals succeed. All right. And the headers, you don't see the header in your URL, but it's something that you have to provide in your request. But everything here is when you provide the request. So you're formatting what you're asking for. So, and the header is kind of invisible. So you have to see that in the HTTP header to see what you have provided. But it's usually for authorization. So how you authenticate to your REST API. That's usually it. There are some, again, each API is different from the other. There are some you can also provide parameters using the headers. But all this is supported by Qlik connectors, and are quite easy to use, okay? And finally, the response. So most part of time, you're being JSON responses. Some are XML. The XML is kind of retired now, so people don't use XML anymore. XML was more common for web services. Web services like the grandfather of REST APIs, or maybe just the father. But now it's the most common response is a JSON response. So JSON have this very particular structure. If you're not familiar with JSON, I highly recommend studying JSON because it's common. You're going to need it at some point. There are a lot of web online materials about that. W3C Schools is a very good portal to learn this kind of technology. It's very easy, very small steps. And JSON is not hard. It looks awkward, but it's as soon as you get it, it's easy, okay? So it's usually like a dictionary, like you have a key value pair or a property value. In this case, the properties are ID, amount, email, payment method. So all the those colors are the properties or keys, and the green ones and the yellow ones in this case are the values, right? In most cases, the values are inside between double quotes, including the properties. So most part of time, you're going to see double quotes everywhere. When you just have numeric objects, you just need to put the number. Those are for numeric values, right? And also objects. This a good example there is the payment method. So payment methods inside of it is an object, right? So then you have the payment methods include the type and the last four properties. It's like a subclass. If you're familiar with class developing using class, the charts here in this case is the main class, and then you have subclasses inside of it. And then you can have arrays. Every time you see square brackets, it's because if you have a collection of objects. This is a very common one, and you're going to see details in this class. Okay. Next, the status code. Again, this is not a rule, but are common ways to see the response. So every time you test your API, you may have some of these status. The most common ones are the 200 and 401. 404 is also common, but then 200 is usually is okay. So everything's working. So you should have your request was accepted. 401 is for not authorized, so you have to check your authorization. So you're probably missing something. By the way, one interesting thing, REST APIs usually don't return error messages. I think Stripe does. And again, Stripe is amazing. Stripe sometimes returns very detailed error messages, but not every time. And it's not common at all in REST APIs. So sometimes you get the 404, you have no idea what's going on. So you don't know what's wrong. So you have to investigate, but something's wrong, right? So if it's not a 200, you have to review your things. And again, 401 is common, is unauthorized. Usually that's the one. 404, so you request something that does not exist. You probably type a resource that does not exist. So let's say instead of applications, you just type it application, so you're missing an S. So this will get a resource not found. So always keep an eye on the API documentations. API documentations are very important. You have to find your REST API documentation because that's a guidebook, your map to make it work, to be well succeed. And some are terrible. The documentation is terrible, but you have to work with the REST API documentation. Okay, that's very important. And 429, if you're a heavy developer, you're going to see this error. So you have too many requests. So this is also something that the documentation may provide it. So let's say, you cannot do more than 100 requests per minute. So if you try that, then you're going to have an error like that. So you'll be blocked for some time. Okay. Yes. So then you have these general things like the static codes. Gives you an idea where is it. So what's the problem? Where is the problem? Like 400s are usually on this client side, and 500s are usually on the server side. All right. Finally, authentication. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about it because we have a video only about that. So authentication can be very challenging, especially in Qlik, right? The easiest one by far, API key. So you just get an API key, the bearer authentication. That's every time you see that one, say, okay, we're good. So that we don't have any problem with the API key. So it's like a password. So just have that. It will live for X amount of days or months or years. So you have that API key, you'll be fine. So it's very easy and straightforward to implement. Usually you do in the header. So just put a header, bearer, token, that's it. OAuth, I always have nightmares with OAuth. It's the very secure. It's the one that I think is the most secure one. And but it's challenging to apply this one because again, each REST API implements it in a different way. Okay. And in Qlik, especially in Qlik, you need extra steps to support OAuth authentication because it's not native. So you have to do some work in your load script in order to make it work. And bearer token is very similar to the API key. I think API key is when actually is where you have the user and password, very similar to a user and password that you type in a login page. So we have those two. Bearer token is very similar. It's you pass it in the authentication header. So the bearer token API key are very similar. Okay, it's just the way you deliver it. It's different. Okay, and then episode 4 of the series, you're going to see this in details in how Qlik supports each one of those kind of authentications, right? And also pagination. Pagination is especially hard, right? Like sometimes is the hardest parts of REST API implementation Qlik because again, depends on how people implement REST APIs. For some reason, some people loves making this almost impossible. And you have to do a lot of work in your load script to make this happen, right? Some are perfect fine. Like Qlik Cloud REST APIs are very easy to do the pagination. They're very friendly and easy to implement. Some are challenging. Like the Stripe one, it's not that easy, but implementing Qlik, it's okay. It's not a big deal. And then you give you the tools to implement on more challenging paginations. Pagination, you'll be always challenging. So keep that in mind. Don't be afraid. Okay, but it's usually the hardest parts. So the challenging ones are authentication, and especially pagination. Pagination it can be very tricky. Okay. And again, we're going to see that in details. I think it's one of the last 2 episodes will be only about pagination. All right. And just to recap the whole thing, so REST API is about making the requests. So it's usually get or post. And for Qlik, it will be only get or post. You have the endpoints. So you have the version of endpoints, the resource in the base URL, the key parameters. So the parameters in URL or the header. You have the JSON response, right? And the status code. So all those elements, those are all the elements that you have to work with. And then the pagination, right? So pagination will be one thing that can give us some nightmares. And in the next episode, we're going to see Postman and other API tools. So this is very important topic. Don't skip that one because this will be the foundation to build your knowledge to implement the REST API in the Qlik Cloud. Okay. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in next class.